The battle for oil. Saudi Arabia and OPEC versus the USA, a turning point in the global economy. The global oil market has always been more than just a platform for commodity trading. It has been, and continues to be, a battlefield for power, geopolitical influence, and economic dominance. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, are constantly at the center of this war. Thanks to their ability to control oil flows and thereby influence global markets, they often hold the fate of entire economies in their hands. This position of power has had significant impacts on both oil importing and oil exporting nations. In recent months, a dangerous scenario has emerged that has shaken the global economy, particularly the United States. Saudi Arabia and OPEC have been attempting to bypass, weaken, and neutralize the long-standing U.S. oil sanctions. This poses a significant threat to the stability of the U.S. economy and disrupts the balance of global political power. Historical context. Saudi Arabia's influence and OPEC's power. To understand the significance of this recent event, we must look back. Saudi Arabia, the de facto leader of OPEC, has played a key role in the global oil market for decades. Thanks to its vast oil reserves and unique ability to strategically control production volumes, the kingdom wields considerable influence over global oil prices. This control allows Saudi Arabia and OPEC to act as a consortium, not only regulating oil production but also stabilizing the world market, always with the goal of creating favorable conditions for consortium members. The cooperation between Saudi Arabia and OPEC has always been characterized by mutual dependence. The kingdom often sets a course that is followed by other member states. Thanks to its dominant position, Saudi Arabia has been able to influence world political affairs and secure its position as the undisputed leader of the cartel. On the other hand, there is the United States, which plays a vital role in the global oil market as both a producer and consumer. In recent years, the United States has significantly increased its oil production, becoming one of the largest oil producers in the world, thanks to technological advances in shale oil production and hydraulic fracking. At the same time, however, the U.S. remains one of the largest oil importers. This dual role places the United States in a precarious position. While it benefits from stable oil prices, it is also vulnerable to geopolitical events and the actions of other producers. U.S. sanctions, a tool of geopolitical power. For decades, the United States has used economic sanctions as an effective tool to influence global energy markets and the policies of oil-producing countries. Particular attention has been paid to countries like Iran, Venezuela, and Russia, which are seen as threats to U.S. interests. By imposing sanctions, the United States has attempted to limit these countries' exports, weaken their economic foundations, and reduce their geopolitical influence. These sanctions, which primarily targeted the oil industries of these countries, have been an effective means of limiting the influence of former competitors. However, they have also had far-reaching consequences for global markets, often resulting in price volatility and diplomatic tensions, as many countries view sanctions as a disruption of global economic flows. The dramatic shift. Saudi Arabia and OPEC strike back. In recent months, however, Saudi Arabia and OPEC have developed an unusual strategy to mitigate the impact of U.S. oil sanctions and neutralize much of their effectiveness. Through a combination of increased oil production, new alliances with sanctioned countries, and deliberate circumvention of U.S. financial and trade restrictions, OPEC has managed to reroute oil flows to global markets. This not only leads to lower oil prices but also reduces the impact of U.S. sanctions, creating conditions that allow affected countries like Iran and Venezuela to survive economically. A particularly important element of this strategy is Saudi Arabia's decision to increase oil production deliberately. In the past, the kingdom often reduced production to stabilize prices, particularly during periods of weak demand. This time, however, Saudi Arabia has chosen a different path. By significantly increasing production, it can offset the impact of U.S. sanctions on other countries like Iran and ensure their continued activity in global markets. Furthermore, Saudi Arabia has built a strategic partnership with Russia, another country that has been under U.S. sanctions for many years. These alliances are crucial in maintaining a continuous flow of oil to global markets. Russia, which has struggled to access Western markets due to sanctions, has been able to develop alternative trade routes thanks to cooperation with OPEC, thus maintaining economic stability. These events have profoundly altered the geopolitical balance of power. In particular, Russia's economic resurgence has threatened U.S. foreign policy, as Russia has managed to maintain its position in the global market despite sanctions and expand its influence in strategically important regions such as the Middle East. The erosion of the petrodollar system, a blow to the USA. One of the most severe consequences of these new developments is the gradual erosion of the so-called petrodollar system. For decades, oil has been traded primarily in US dollars, which provided the United States with enormous economic and geopolitical advantages. This system allowed the U.S. to increase its economic power over global financial flows and ensure the stability of the U.S. dollar. However, as Saudi Arabia and OPEC build alternative trade networks and circumvent sanctions, the U.S. dollar's dominance as the primary currency for oil trading is increasingly being called into question. This paves the way for other currencies, such as the Chinese yuan and the euro, to play a more significant role in the global oil market. This shift not only weakens America's economic position but also its geopolitical power. The economic and geopolitical impacts on the USA. The impact of this situation on the U.S. economy has been noticeable. The overproduction of oil on global markets leads to lower prices, which benefits consumers in the short term but severely harms the U.S. oil industry. In particular, shale oil producers, whose profits depend on high oil prices, are facing enormous financial challenges. Many companies have filed for bankruptcy, and waves of layoffs have hit the oil-producing regions of the United States. These economic problems are further exacerbated as the easing of U.S. sanctions gives countries like Iran and Venezuela new opportunities to stabilize their economies and expand their geopolitical influence. Iran, for example, has been able to realize its strategic ambitions in the Middle East and increase its support for proxy groups in countries like Syria and Iraq. Meanwhile, Venezuela has managed to consolidate its socialist government despite massive U.S. efforts to destabilize the regime. All these events have shaken America's position on the world stage. Its ability to exert geopolitical influence through economic pressure is increasingly weakening. For decades, Washington has relied on its economic power and control over the global financial system to control other countries and enforce political changes. However, as Saudi Arabia and OPEC continue to build alternative trade networks and bypass U.S. sanctions, the U.S. is losing this vital lever of power. The U.S. faces a strategic dilemma. With these developments, the U.S. government is facing a strategic dilemma. There are calls for tougher measures against Saudi Arabia and OPEC, including the possibility of new sanctions. However, such a move would likely lead to a further escalation of tensions in the global oil market and could result in a further rise in oil prices. Moreover, an overly aggressive policy towards Saudi Arabia could further strain the already tense relationship between the two countries. One possible solution is to increase domestic oil production to reduce the market share of foreign oil producers. However, this presents a significant challenge, especially given the financial difficulties many U.S. oil companies are currently facing. The shale oil industry, once a symbol of America's energy independence, is struggling with high debt and low prices. Conclusion: a new era of global oil politics. Recent developments in the global oil markets may mark the beginning of a new era. The ability of Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bypass U.S. sanctions and manipulate global markets to their advantage has reshaped the balance of power in the oil business. While the U.S. still plays a significant role, it is facing a growing number of challenges. The neutralization of U.S. sanctions and the weakening of the petrodollar system could have long-term consequences that affect not only the U.S. economy but also its geopolitical position. The U.S. now faces the difficult task of developing new strategies to maintain its position in a rapidly changing world. Thank you for staying until the end. If you like this material, Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Stay informed, stay connected, and we'll see you in the next video.